Welcome to People in Profit, your essential business briefing. I'm Kate Moody. Coming up, as Iran pulls back from the international nuclear deal, we look at how U.S. sanctions have impacted the country's economy over the past year. With planes grounded around the world and growing questions about transparency, can Boeing restore trust in its brand? And Wi-Fi for All, the European program that's providing free internet connections to remote towns across the continent. First up, Tehran will no longer respect aspects of the nuclear deal, which was struck with international powers in 2015. The announcement came a year after Washington pulled out of the deal and months after it reimposed sanctions on Iranian oil. According to the International Monetary Fund, Iran's economy shrank by 3.9% in 2018 and is expected to contract even further this year as people face soaring prices.
It's the first week of Ramadan, and shoppers at Tehran's Grand Bazaar are struggling to afford food. Since last year, the prices of even the most basic items have skyrocketed, making the large evening meals that break the fast an expensive, if not unaffordable, celebration.
It's very difficult for the people, very difficult. When people can't afford even milk and dates, what are they supposed to eat? You go to bed, and when you wake up, prices have been raised 10 times.
A year ago, US President Donald Trump withdrew America from the Obama-era international nuclear deal. Since then, inflation in Iran has reached over 50%, and food prices have jumped more than 85% in just a year. 12 years ago, the international community imposed sanctions over Iran's nuclear program, flatlining its economy for several years. After these were lifted in 2015, GDP growth shot up, driven by the oil and gas industry. Since the US reinstated sanctions, foreign investment has evaporated and the economy's on the slide. The International Monetary Fund forecasts GDP will shrink by 6% this year. Threatening to penalise any country trading with Iran, Trump's policy has cut off its financial lifeblood, oil sales, which represent around half the country's annual revenue. The nuclear deal saw a significant uptick in the production of crude oil, which has now come crashing down after US sanctions. Oil exports have more than halved, and Iran's government is estimated to have lost the equivalent of €9 billion in revenue as a result. The situation has led Iran's president to threaten to leave the nuclear deal if other signatory countries don't shield it from US sanctions.
If Britain, France, Germany, Russia and China return to the negotiating table and help Iran reach its benefits in the field of oil and banking, Iran will return to its commitments according to the nuclear deal.
If the economy continues like this, unemployment could be another worry. At the moment, it's formally at 12%. This could increase sharply, especially among young people.
Its 737 MAX planes remain grounded across the globe, while questions mount over its commitment to safety. Boeing is facing an uphill climb to regain public confidence and regulators' approval after 2 deadly crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia. The accidents are widely thought to be linked to an anti-stall software. Adding to its image problem, the admission that engineers identified a fault in the pilot warning system of the jets in 2017, but the glitch was not addressed. The American aviation giant says it's working to fix any and all problems and insists its entire fleet will be safe to fly. Well, for some insight, let's turn to Bjorn Ferm, a former Air Force pilot and aeronautical and economic analyst at Leham. Thanks for joining us on People in Profit. Tell us, from your point of view, how big is Boeing's image problem right now?
Well, it's rather big, actually. They had perhaps the strongest brand because they've been the leader in the worldwide airline business for the last 2 or 3 years. Before that, Airbus was the leader. But I would say Boeing had the strongest brand. And right now, they have really done a lot of damage to their brand, serious damage.
How would you assess Boeing's crisis management strategy to date? What's the biggest mistake that they've made?
Well, they started out after the Lion Air crash by actually blaming the pilot. And the more that was actually bubbling up from that investigation, the more we knew. We could see that me as pilots, but also the broader audience, could see that it wasn't the pilot. It was the aircraft that actually played a very rogue card to the pilot, put him in a very difficult situation. And what has recently come up from the Lion Air accident is that the captain, which was flying and which was dealing with the whole situation, was very calm, very composed, and very capable. So that was the wrong strategy from Boeing. And then when the Ethiopian accident happened, they continued with the attitude that we will see if it's not the pilot this time as well. And what actually came out there very early was that the pilots had actually followed their extra instructions they issued after the Lion Air accident, and still they couldn't manage to keep the aircraft from crashing. And that was extremely damaging to Boeing. Then the CEO changed the tack and said, we own the problem, we will fix it. He took it on to Boeing. But apparently, recently, the lawyers have got hold of the company again, and now they're actually starting to peddle it the way that the pilot is to blame as well. And this whole to and fro and the change of tack and the line of the pilot being to blame, I think is very damaging to Boeing. It's obvious to everyone else than Boeing's management that it's actually the aircraft which is the problem here.
One of the surprising revelations in the wake of these crashes is that some safety features on the 737 MAX were being sold as optional at an additional cost. Is that standard practice in the industry?
Unfortunately, to some extent it is. It's the so-called alpha indicator, alpha angle of attack indicator, which was optional. It's a decade-long discussion whether a pilot should have this information or not. So it's not just Boeing who's been having this as an option. But there was other things in connection with this option, which was less correctly handled. Actually, a warning that this sensor, which is feeling the angle between the wind and the aircraft, which is a very important information for a pilot, that this should have been standard in some of the airlines' fleets, and it wasn't because of a mistake. So there's a lot of things that has happened that actually is putting more and more burden onto Boeing over the last months.
There's likely to be a fairly significant financial cost as well to Boeing. Where do you think it will suffer the most?
The thing which is most obvious is the flying public at the moment. You know, they will basically ask, is it a Boeing? Is it the Boeing MAX that I'm going to fly on? Once it gets flying again, which I think is going to happen within the next 3 to 4 months. Because there is nothing fundamental wrong with the aircraft. It was a mistake by Boeing. They should own up to it. They should have fixed it, and they should have taken the responsibility for it. But the most damaging for Boeing will be that the airlines, their customers, which has to choose between Airbus, a equally good product, and Boeing, two comparable products, they will more and more now lean towards Airbus because Airbus doesn't have the reputation that Boeing has now owned themselves of being greedy, being profit-oriented, and putting product and safety in the second order.
What about the Federal Aviation Administration, the U.S. safety regulator? How much responsibility or blame should they be shouldering in this scandal?
I think they should be shouldering about half of the blame for what happened because their oversight has been lacking. And once again, it's very damaging for the FAA and Boeing how the cooperation between FAA and Boeing actually has been conducted. The more that's coming up, the more you would question how they work together. FAA has given Boeing far too much responsibility, far too much own revealing of whatever problem they have with the aircraft, and not enough oversight. So I think FAA is in equal measure in problem as Boeing is.
How does a safety and PR crisis like this one affect the aviation industry as a whole?
It's negative for the aviation industry. I talked to an Airbus executive just recently, and he said this is not good for anyone. Safety is something which the airlines and the aircraft industry hold very dear, and they don't compete on it. They don't say, look, I was better, you were worse. That's an absolute no-no in this business. Everyone is working to put in the most safe airline transport system that we can achieve in the world. And this is bad for the whole industry.
All right, Bjorn Ferm, thanks so much for joining us on People and Profit.
Okay, thanks.
Next, it's a luxury that many of us take for granted, signing on to the nearest Wi-Fi network on your phone or tablet. But some rural towns feel cut off from the internet. Many are taking advantage of an EU program which offers funding to get public spaces online. Owen Barnell explains.
The small French town of Say is hidden away amongst hills in the south of France. off the grid and without public Wi-Fi. Until now. Last month, Wi-Fi hotspots went online. Now kids roam the streets looking for the best hotspots to take advantage of the 20 megabyte connection.
I go on social media and also on the internet to look a bit at games and at websites. I enjoy it.
At my house, there's a very slow connection, so it's actually better outdoors.
Brussels is behind it with a European Union project to finance free public Wi-Fi across the continent. Called Wi-Fi for You, municipalities across the bloc were free to sign up and claim a voucher worth €15,000 to help fund the installation of Wi-Fi hotspots. €120 million was put into the project, and 6,000 to 8,000 municipalities are to benefit by 2020. Just like Say, the village signed up in November, and now it's reaping the benefits.
Everyone can access it, though young people are on it most as they are always on their phones. Also, businesses, holidaymakers, people just passing through, and shopkeepers.
Wi-Fi for You will bring Wi-Fi to parks, squares, libraries, and all manner of public spaces across Europe. Sign-ups are on a first-come, first-served basis, and there is one thing to consider. An internet connection is already needed to complete the online application.
Well, that's all for this week, but you can find the best of our coverage on our Facebook page, France 24 Business, or you can tweet me at Kate A. Moody. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Fake news. Noun. False stories that appear to be news, spread on the internet or using other media. At France 24, our job is to provide you with information that's been verified. We check sources, we check facts, we sort what is true from what is fake.
At the France 24 Observers, we verify photos and videos circulating online. If they're fake, we let you know and tell you how we spotted them.
In Fact or Fake, we dig into viral stories around Europe to shake out the truth from the trash.
Every day on Info Migrants' website, we fight fake news spread on social networks about the reality of migration.
France 24, news based on facts.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.